So yesterday, Monday, Diddy celebrated his 55th birthday, but this year was a lot different. It was no Diddy parties. It was none of that. None of that stuff. Well, happily, so I guess right now. But anyway, so this is his first birthday behind bars. Yeah, but so there's still, I mean, it's crazy too because there's still more happening in court. Like, I mean, everything is still active even though we're not hearing about it as much anymore. And the people may be fatigued like we talked about prior.
The courtroom buzzed with a tension that felt almost electric, the kind of atmosphere that only builds when the stakes are stratospheric and the players involved are larger than life. Sean Diddy Combs, the artist, turned mogul whose name has been synonymous with power, luxury, and undeniable influence, strode into the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan. Every eye glued to him his once glamorous aura now carried away a certain somberness, as if the years of allegations and whispers have finally materialized into a crushing reality. Dressed in the beige prison jumpsuit that's become his unwelcome uniform, his graying hair and tired eyes painted a stark contrast to the vibrant, untouchable persona.
That they will be adding 2 defense attorneys. We only thought initially it was 1. But one thing that stood out to me when Mark Agnifilo was talking about this was he said that these defense attorneys are in the courtroom right now. I didn't see Mark Garagos in that courtroom, but what I did see is 2 defense attorneys that have been there when Brian Steele came on board. And those 2 defense attorneys were Nicole.
He crafted over decades, yet even in the subdued state, Diddy's presence was commanding his every glance and subtle gesture, reminding the spectators that this wasn't just another trial, it was a reckoning that they would be adding 2 defense attorneys. We only thought initially it was 1, but one thing that stood out to me when Mark Agnifilo was talking about this was he said that these defense attorneys are in the courtroom right now. I didn't see Mark Garagos in that courtroom, but what I did see is 2 defense attorneys that have been there when Brian Steele came on board, and those 2 defense attorneys were Nicole Westmoreland. The allegations stacked against him are not just shocking, they're seismic accusations of orchestrated misconduct, coercion, and even the manipulation of those closest to him have turned the once celebrated king of hip-hop into the centerpiece of one of the most explosive.
Or not really the judge. The government didn't go into too many details about the extent of the plea offer, but one thing that they had said was pretty much that under the plea offer, he would be facing less time than he's facing if he would have gone to trial. So when the allocution portion came, Diddy stood up. The judge kind of read him everything that he had needed to read to him, just about whether or not he was of sound mind.
Scandals in entertainment history. The federal charges read like the script of a Hollywood thriller, but the drama unfolding in real life is far darker. The term freak-off has become a chilling buzzword, evoking images of meticulously planned events that prosecutors argue were designed to fulfill Diddy's alleged desires while trapping participants in a web of fear and control. As a gallery filled with reporters, legal analysts, and curious onlookers, it became clear this was no ordinary day in court. The air inside the room was heavy with unspoken questions. How did it come to this? How could someone who built an empire on charisma and charm become embroiled in such damning accusations? And perhaps most intriguingly, what would Diddy's defense team, stacked with some of the fiercest legal minds in the country, pull out of their arsenal to counter the government's case? To 2, or not really. The judge, the government didn't go into too many details about the extent of the plea offer, but one thing that they had, so it was pretty much that under the plea offer he would be facing less time than he's facing if he would have gone to trial. So when
as far as the plea offer that came up in the last hearing, where the government said we did offer him a deal or an offer, I should say, and that he rejected it, and now it's official, and he said it to the court as well too. You know, he stood up, he said that he consulted with this about his attorneys, and it seems like they're planning, or not even seems like they're rolling the dice by going.
Elocution portion came. Diddy stood up. The judge kind of read him everything that he had needed to read to him just about him, whether or not he was of sound mind, whether or not of Diddy's family was glaring in the earlier pretrial hearings. His inner Circle had been a constant filling the benches with a show of solidarity. His mother Janice and his children had been there, their presence a quiet but powerful statement of support. But now, as the trial loomed, just days away, the seats reserved for his loved ones sat empty. Was this a calculated decision to avoid the media frenzy, or was it a sign of cracks forming in the foundation of his once unshakable support system? If Diddy felt the weight of their absence, he didn't show it, at least not outwardly. Instead, he scanned the room with a steely gaze, his expression unreadable, but undeniably intense. What added another layer of intrigue to the day's proceedings was a revelation that Diddy had formally rejected a plea deal, a decision that sent shockwave through the legal and entertainment worlds alike. By turning down the government's offer.
Jesse, we've been talking about this, just how confident the defense appears that, they could get off on these charges. They could be acquitted, or possibly, who knows what could happen, just because, again, you are rolling the dice. This really does feel like just kind of like, just kind of like a gambling a little bit with Diddy's life in a sense, just because, if you're offered maybe X amount of time versus this huge amount of time, which could
offer. He wasn't just betting on his legal team's ability to dismantle the prosecution's case. He was gambling with his future. It's a high-risk move, especially when the potential consequences include spending the rest of his life behind bar. But Diddy's confidence, or perhaps defiance, was palpable when asked directly by the judge if he understood the stakes. His response was unwavering. "Yes, I did." It was a moment that underscored the razor-sharp tension of the trial, a reminder that this was no plea for leniency. This was war. As far as the plea offer that came up in the last hearing, where the government said, "We did offer him a deal," or an offer, I should say, and that he rejected it, and now it's official, and he said it to the court as well too. No, he stood up, he said that he consulted with this about his attorneys. And it seems like
you would think possibly, it's the federal government building a case against you. Maybe you would go for the lesser offer. But again, that would be having to admit that he did something wrong. And the defense has always maintained that he is innocent. He has done nothing wrong, that this is just, these are just ex-girlfriends that are mad at, like, just all these types of things that the defense
are planning, or not even seems like they are there, rolling the dice by going behind the scenes. Whispers of strategy and speculation swirl the defense team, led by the formidable Mark Agnello, had already made headlines for its bold approach. Agnafilo, known for defending high-profile clients like Martin Shkreli and Keith Reary, has a reputation for turning seemingly insurmountable cases into courtroom victories. But even with his expertise, the odds seemed daunting. The government's case was meticulously crafted, its foundation built on years of investigations, witness testimonies, and what prosecutors claimed was irrefutable evidence among their star witnesses, alleged victims who were prepared to testify under their real names, a move that signaled their determination to confront Diddy directly. The sheer gravity of their accusations was enough to leave even seasoned legal analysts done. And yet
the judge said that, he seemed to be taking this kind of matter seriously. Now, I will just kind of preface it and say it. I haven't seen the documentary, but it's not out of the realm, or it's not out of the norm that she even went on this documentary as well, too, because she had previously gone on another documentary and kind of talked about her client's accusations against Diddy as well, too. So I was surprised that they brought up this particular documentary. Again, I don't know the extent of what she had said, but the defense seemed very annoyed in a way.
Defense appeared unfazed. Agnello's strategy was beginning to take shape, and it was clear he intended to frame Diddy not as a predator, but as a misunderstood man, caught in a whirlwind of consensual, albeit unconventional relationships. The term swinger lifestyle had already been floated in pre-trial discussions, hinting at a narrative that sought to normalize the alleged behavior as part of a broader cultural phenomenon. It was a controversial angle, to say the least, but one that had the potential to resonate with jurors. It presented effectively. Jesse, we've been talking about this. Just how confident the defense appears that, they could get off on these charges, they could be acquitted, or possibly, who knows what could happen, just because, again, you are rolling the dice really does feel like, just kind of like, just.
So the judge, again, seemed to be taking that matter pretty seriously and just pretty much said that, everyone, the attorneys, the witnesses' attorneys, the accusers' attorneys, they all have to adhere to these professional rules. They all have to adhere to this professional conduct. And if this continues and if more things are said that get onto the judge's...
Kind of like a gambling a little bit. With Diddy's life, in a sense, just... because if you're offered maybe X amount of time versus this huge amount of time, which could be, but the courtroom drama didn't end there the days. Discussions also touched on logistical hurdles, including how to handle the sensitive nature of the trial's evidence and testimony. The judge ruled that Diddy would be allowed to wear non-prison attire during the trial, a decision that, while seemingly minor, carried significant symbolic weight. The image of Diddy in designer button-down shirts and tailored pants as opposed to the khaki jumpsuit of a detainee could subtly influence how jurors perceive him. It was a calculated move, one that underscored the defense's focus on...
First of all, I can only imagine how sloppy Sean Combs was with evidence when he got busted with those 2 machine guns or 3 machine guns with the altered serial numbers. So I really don't trust Sean Combs or the people around him's ability to properly cover up anything. So I envision that you're going to see at trial payments from his Amex for flights for people, straight payments directly from his company to people.
On controlling every detail of the narrative. As the hearing continued, the prosecution raised concerns about potential violations of the gag order, pointing to recent media coverage and a high-profile documentary that had reignited public interest in the case. Defense attorneys fired back, accusing the government of trying to sway public opinion before the trial even began. The tension between the two sides was palpable, their exchanges sharp and unrelenting. It was clear that both teams were gearing up for a battle that would be as much about public perception as it was about the law. Bars, you would think. Possibly, it's the federal government building a case against you. Maybe you would go for the lesser offer. But again, that would be having to admit that he had did something wrong, and the defense has always maintained that he is innocent. He has done nothing wrong. This is just you. No, these are just ex-girlfriends that are mad, like just all these types of things at
the time frame is important because this happened in hotels, in places that have surveillance, that there's records that could be consistent with his testimony about when he alleges that these parties took place. He probably has his own information about who attended the events. When you're somebody like Sean Combs and you're such a celebrity and you're engaged in this type of behavior, people around you are memorializing it.
Defense is, meanwhile, rumors of a potential expansion to Diddy's legal team added another layer of intrigue. Speculation had been swirling for weeks about high-profile attorneys who might join the defense, including names that would undoubtedly command attention in the courtroom. While no official announcements were made, the mere possibility of such additions signaled the seriousness with which Diddy and his team were approaching the trial. This wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about mounting a defense so formidable that it could dismantle the government's case piece by piece. And then there was the question of the jury. Selecting an impartial panel for a case of this magnitude was always going to be a Herculean task. After all, who hasn't heard of Diddy? The man's name is etched into the fabric of pop culture, his influence extending far beyond music and into fashion, business, and philanthropy. Finding jurors who could separate the man from the myth, who could weigh the evidence without being swayed by his celebrity, was a challenge that loomed large over the proceedings. The judges planned to question 50 prospective jurors a day, underscore the urgency of the process, but whether it would yield the Right results remain.
This is somebody that actually thought that he was above the law. So I can only, think that, he was sloppy in the way that he did these crimes, that there's probably a trail of evidence, not only involving him, but everybody in his circle that he would, delegate these responsibilities to.
For a trial that promises to be as riveting as it is consequential. The stakes couldn't be higher, not just for Diddy, but for everyone involved. Careers, reputations, and even lives hang in the balance, and the outcome will undoubtedly reverberate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. But as the evidence piles up and the testimonies loom, one question lingers, casting a shadow over everything. How much of the truth are we really prepared to face all? Right, that's it for now. Let us know your take in the comments. Do you think Diddy's defense has a chance, or is this case already a lost cause? And what do you think about the prosecution's approach so far? Drop your thoughts below, and we'll catch you in the next